In Vanquish, you play as Sam Gideon, a DARPA agent equipped with an experimental augmented reaction suit. Sam teams up with Marines to retake control of a solar energy harvesting space station that the Russians have converted into a weapon. Sam and the Marines must win back the facility before the Russians can use it to destroy New York City. Vanquish at first glance looks like a really generic third-person shooter, but it's much more than that. What really sets Vanquish apart is that it's much more action-oriented than other games. While you can play it snap to cover like any other third-person shooter, and you will need to utilize cover at points, Vanquish really shines in your mobility. Boosting around the battlefield is a lot of fun. It's really amazing how a simple ability really increases the pace of combat and your overall enjoyment of the game. The boost can be used offensively to quickly advance around the battlefield, or defensively to dodge missile barrages or get back into cover after taking a lot of damage. You do have regenerating health in Vanquish, and it's tied to your augmented reaction system. When you take critical damage, your AR suit will automatically trigger bullet time. This is your cue to get into cover and regenerate some health, or stand and fight to eliminate any immediate threats. You can manually trigger bullet time by aiming after a dodge or while boosting. This does drain your AR gauge very quickly, but it can be a great way to take out more desirable targets quickly or to get some significant damage on larger enemies. Managing your suit's gauge is a fundamental part of Vanquish. If you let your suit overheat, you have a very significant cooldown period. This encourages you to pay close attention and ride that razor's edge of almost exhausting all your AR gauge, but never letting it completely empty. Vanquish has a decent variety of weapons, but the great thing about them is they all appear regularly. There are no, use this gun for this section, or otherwise rare weapons. Every weapon appearing regularly is great just for the sake of variety in combat, but it's especially good for the upgrade system. The weapon upgrade system has a deceptive amount of depth to it. The way it's set up is when you pick up a gun you're already carrying with full ammo, the weapon will rank up. These rank ups provide you bonuses such as max ammo, increased damage, fire rate, or weapon exclusive upgrades like tighter patterning on your machine gun. These upgrades apply to all future pickups, so while you may lose out on some ammo now, you're investing in all future pickups for that type of gun. In the beginning, it does feel a bit restrictive as you do forego using some guns so you can upgrade them, but it does end up paying dividends by the end of the game. You can also do some clever shuffling of your guns to get bonus upgrades even if your ammo is depleted, which was satisfying. What the upgrade system really does is encourage you to commit to using a single gun for a length of time. You're rewarded for using one weapon until you're out of ammo, as you can swap it out for a new one while the others stay at full ammo for potential rank ups. Vanquish really suffers in the production value department. It's easily the worst part of Vanquish. Graphically, it's competent. The AR suit and most of the enemies, ships, and weapons have cool designs. It's just nothing really special. There are a lot of repeated enemies and the environments all kind of feel the same. You do fight each of the boss characters at least twice, except for one. It's not the end of the world, but some extra diversity would have been welcome. A lot of the combat in Vanquish is against a lot of enemies. It feels very grand in scale at times, and there are some pretty unique robots. The robots all have cool designs, and all of them are fun to fight, which is amazing. Vanquish succeeds by keeping the enemy roster tighter, but making every enemy type enjoyable to fight and kill. There are QuickTime events in Vanquish, but only a handful. It doesn't get a free pass because QuickTime events are almost always awful, but they are so unobtrusive in Vanquish that they're barely noteworthy. Vanquish's music is totally forgettable, but none of it is atrocious. Again, it's competent with nothing to write home or complain about. The voice acting is phoned in across the board. Everyone's trying to be gruff and manly, but it comes off as trying way too hard and overly corny.
I know.
This the toy you've been working on? Not even scratched. You did get some training in this thing, right?
Our simulators are very thorough.
The low quality voice acting adds to the weak production values, and it does drag the experience down. There is an option for subtitles, but oddly enough, they only appear during specific cutscenes. Any dialogue in-game has no subtitles.
Yeah.
If you go there, you should be able to flank the enemy from behind.
This combined with the low dialogue volume and background noise make it hard to catch what people are saying most of the time. It's not a huge issue, as the story in Vanquish is forgettable and your objectives are always very straightforward. But it is a bit baffling to include subtitles and cutscenes, but not in the gameplay sections. While the main plot of Vanquish is wrapped up in a reasonable way, you also do have a sequel-baiting ending, which if a certain rumor is true, may be more likely than originally thought. Vanquish is a moderate challenge. Every fight is against a ton of lesser enemies or a few larger enemies which require more attention to deal with. Since most enemies are repeated, including bosses, it can feel a bit repetitive. The bosses the second time around are generally easier as you have significant upgrades to your weapons which make you deal a lot more damage and have a lot more ammunition. In the first fight against the Argus, you may barely scrape by even with the mounted machine guns in the area. The next fights against the Argus were significantly easier simply because of better guns and experience fighting them. Weapon upgrades definitely make the game a lot easier, especially once you start getting very valuable damage increases which appear later. There are several one-hit kills in Vanquish, mostly in the form of giant lasers from bigger enemies or damaged robots set to suicide bomb you. The amount of deaths I had to one-hit kills felt high, but at the same time, I survived a lot of damage that probably should have killed me. It feels like a fair balance. You'll learn quite quickly what attacks will obliterate you, so you can quickly recognize them when they do appear. Then, for general combat, you're given quite a large health bar that regenerates quickly, so it errs on the side of being forgiving rather than punishing. Vanquish is on the shorter end with a completed playthrough, minus any optional training outside of the tutorial being completed in 6 hours, 53 minutes, and 9 seconds. It's paced very well. Usually third-person shooters fall into traps of having long exposition dumps or just downtime, and while Vanquish does throw a decent chunk of cutscenes at you, they rarely feel too long or break up the combat too much. You're battling robots almost the entire runtime, with the only downtime being the downtime you choose to spend pre- and post-battle. Vanquish is very linear. It's also not bogged down with things like driving sections or mounted turret sections. There is one section where you're forced to do some sniping under a time constraint, but it's fun and doesn't feel like a chore. Otherwise, you're always on the ground in the fray, which is where Vanquish really shines. Short is good for a game like Vanquish because it makes the campaign much more replayable and helps to mask the repetitive nature of the enemies. Vanquish may be one of the best single-player third-person shooters of last generation. It's short and sweet, and there are really no glaring flaws in the campaign that would make you think twice about playing it a second time. There is a lack of enemy variety, but Vanquish's short campaign and enjoyable enemy types alleviates a lot of that issue. The AR suit is fun to use, boosting around the battlefield and shooting robots in slow motion is great. The weapons all have their place and are all fun to use. The weapon upgrade system is surprisingly deep and really enjoyable to figure out the best ways to min-max on your available weapons. The only real problems with Vanquish are a completely forgettable story, terrible voice acting with no alternative subtitles, and mediocre graphical quality. These issues are mostly nitpicks, as Vanquish does the correct thing and puts its gameplay, which is great, at the forefront. Vanquish gets recommended playing's most prestigious verdict of recommended.